And the reason why it's worth just getting ahead a little bit, you'll see in a lot of his writing, these data are continuously referred to. So in that article in American Psychologist, this gets talked about. In that chapter it will do, and some other places as well. So that's why it's worth bringing a bit of clarity to this. I think I might just keep to this one, get a bit of a discussion about this one, and then we'll maybe look at the ones another time. So this is one of the figures from American Psychologist article. Let you stare at it for a while, and a bit like those magic eye pictures, maybe a little 3D picture will start emerging, maybe not quite as exciting as that. Making sure you can sort of read what's on there. So it's data from that Midas survey. We've got here telling us percentages of people, and we've got here people who are diagnosed, and we're using those criteria, as languishing. Over here, people who are diagnosed as flourishing, and then, now the next one, moderately mentally healthy. So, you know, in terms of nothing else, you've got people who are, using those criteria, can be diagnosed as languishing, people can be diagnosed as flourishing, and people essentially who can't be diagnosed as either, we'll label those as moderately mentally healthy, for the sake of this. And then for each of these, it's the percentage of people then who are, at least I suspect it's in that order there. Yeah, I think so. The big one here would be major depressive episode. Then this one is going to be generalised anxiety and so on. So okay, so these we can eventually now slowly see what it's trying to tell us. And that particular one is in this American Psychologist article. So what's in essence, you can see what it's now graphically representing. What do you feel is an underlying message from that? Well, first of all, sorry Jackie, so...
There's not a lot of flourishing, it looks like lots of people are depressed. And I'd say that if you had an opinion of your own that you felt you were certain, you were quite happy or your well-being was fine, and then you did one of those questionnaires and you didn't tick the boxes where you were meant to, wouldn't it make you feel not as happy as you thought you were?
What do you mean by ticking the boxes you were meant to?
Well, like you picking out the criteria that was...
Because I don't think it'll be one where you're picking out criteria. You'll be filling in like self-report measures, like what we've seen, the RIFS one, and the extended version of that. And based upon your responses there, you could then be scored high or low on these different dimensions, and on those scores, using Key's criteria, be labelled as being flourishing, languishing, or neither of the two.
That's what I mean, but you'd still be, I know you wouldn't be ticking them, you'd be honestly answering a true answer.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is you're still being diagnosed to a certain category, is what I'm trying to say. And if you get what I'm saying?
Possibly, and I'm wondering whether are you assuming then people are going to fill in the questionnaires and then be told that, okay, you filled in your questionnaire and you are officially languishing.
Well, I am, because when I do it, I'm
well, also, because typically, we're going to assume that probably isn't the case. Often people administer these scales and don't get immediate feedback in terms of... So this is just how they've been classified, but also I'm going to pick up your earlier comment saying, so there aren't that many people flourishing. Is that what you're going? You're going?
The way I read that is that of those people who are classified as flourishing, 4.3% of them have major depressive episodes, as opposed to people who are languishing, 28%.
Okay, so is that clear, Jackie? So we all understand this. So initially you might look and say, oh yeah, I can see flourishing over here, and these columns are quite low. Languishing there, but that's not. It's not telling you how many people are flourishing or languishing. This is telling us of those people who are flourishing, and I'm not sure on this particularly. Maybe in the full article it'll tell us the actual overall numbers. And it wouldn't surprise me if, as it turns out, the people who are diagnosed with flourishing are relatively low. But this is actually telling us the percentages. Remember, this is a percentage over here of people who are diagnosed as flourishing. This one is telling us major depressive episode. This tiny one here, generalised anxiety, panic disorder, alcohol dependence, and 2 or more of any of those maybe in the past year?
I would assume so. I mean, but I look at it and I think, isn't that great that even though you've had a major depressive disorder in your life, at some point you can still flourish?
Okay, so that's our
One in
English one.
20 people who are flourishing are got major depressive episode at the same time.
Or have had,
Have had.
I assume.
So we need to probably check on what's meant.
What
So let's pick up a few of those things. So first of all, let's be clear. So it's just not just telling us not many people are flourishing. It's telling us the percentages of people flourishing, experiencing those kinds of illnesses. And then one thing then that Kylie was saying is you're particularly arguing about this one here. So tell us again, Kylie.
I think it's great that 4.8% of the people who are flourishing have had a major depressive disorder in their life, so that having had a major depressive episode does not preclude you to future flourish.
Okay, so that's we one interpretation of this bit. Is saying, because I know at least sometimes people say, well, the flip side of that would be, I think what Mike was pulling up on, was saying, well, maybe so you can be flourishing and having had a major depressive episode. Well, this yes, you could. In terms of always checking back with, by flourishing, it's diagnosed as flourishing using those criteria. So that's where you can check back on that. It's quite possible you could score higher than that, be diagnosed as flourishing, and still, across all of these things, people are, either in generalised anxiety, a small percentage. So we are getting some numbers here.
So is the time scale the same then?
It says 12 months.
12 months.
Okay?
12 month disorder.
And then this last one is trying to sort of say the 2 or more in the past year for the male maybe. So at least, I'm just trying to
Thank you.
get the essence here. So one is,
Read that.
there are still numbers here. Even if you're flourishing, you can still have these experiences. So, bless you. What else is this? So at the moment we're focusing all our attention just down here, which is fine.
Now, I'm actually looking on the
It's a
left as
huge
well.
amount in languishing. More than a quarter of people are, or near a third of people are dependent. That's huge, isn't it?
So generally speaking, again, just trying to keep it simple. So the columns over here are much higher than they are down here. And lo and behold, our moderately mentally healthy are somewhere in the middle. And of course, we can tease apart the detail there because there are some differences. But generally speaking, one message when you read the article is up here: people who are diagnosed as languishing are experiencing far more, essentially, in terms of these kinds of things. While still, it could well be that you could be flourishing and still experiencing them. But overall, you're seeing those kind of things are much lower.
I'd be interested in the correlation between the 28% of major depressive episode and the 2 or more in the past year, whatever it says, 16.4%, which means that you've got, 15% nearly who haven't had more than one depressive, or one episode, more than 2, sorry, in the past year. Let me say that again.
Well, and moving on, they've asked a question just to make sure I understand a bit of it. So if let's make everyone's clear, we're doing something comparing this figure here,
Yep.
28% of people who are languishing reporting a major depressive episode in the past year, assume that's the same as that.
Yep.
This column here is telling us,
16.4% of them have had more than 2.
yeah, and therefore what's your want to know about?
Oh, no, I'm just interested about that what that leaves, that whatever 28 minus
Difference between those
16.4 is, that leaves that have only had one depressive. It's just.
The 2 or more major depressive episodes.
No, any of those.
Two
Two or any of those other ones. They've either had alcohol and depression, or they've had panic attack and 2 of them.
So we're not necessarily saying
But
it's...
it never stopped, so they couldn't have.
Oh yeah, so therefore though, it's not necessarily saying 2 major depressive episodes, 2 or more of these in the past year. It's all talking about the past year.
I think it's quite shocking that many people who are in the middle ground, as we call languishing, they're not ill, they're not mentally diagnosed as ill, they're in this sort of sitting ducks scenario. But I think that's a really high percentage. I think that's quite depressing. Statistic. That many people are suffering anxiety or panic or alcohol dependent, and they're just in this sort of middle ground. So I mean, it must be costing the NHS a lot of money for this middle ground, let alone people that are really ill.
And that's a chunk, I think, of what he's saying.
The languishing and not the mentally ill.
Looking at people's psychological well-being is an important part when you understanding physical well-being as well. Go on, Sarah.
It was saying you'll say the same, and that's what he says in 3 on that talk, is it's
I would guess looking through here, if it's not explicitly something they've asked for, so maybe they haven't done that. So you can possibly identifying other factors that could help with that.
You may find that it's 4.8% on the right are those that are actually in treatment and are flourishing, whereas you can find that 28% because it's diagnosed within this study. They've given the questionnaires to diagnose for, it's self-diagnosed within this study. They're not saying that they're diagnosed by a medical practitioner or whatever. So that 28%, for all you know, might not be having any treatment.
I think it's just people answering the questionnaire. That's what
Yeah, and again, or you keep going back to what's the data coming from. So, but in terms of when you read the article, and I think maybe hearing him speak and reading other chapters, that's one of the arguments saying there that you see a very clear link between diagnostic criteria using his criteria and these other kind of mental illnesses and other physical illnesses.
If are these sort of like four things, is that the characteristic mental health status?
No, these is what they measured in this study.
Specifically those ones. I don't know, it's just a question.
So one question is, why is he focusing on those ones?
I mean, are we actually just saying though that that because they're flourishing, they have such low levels? I mean, we're focusing on the other side of it, but really is what he's saying is these people over here are flourishing and that's why they're showing such low levels.
Yeah.
These people aren't flourishing, which is why they have made, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's, I would say his argument is, but we could even question that, is that if you're flourishing, according to his criteria, then you're less likely to have those kinds of experiences. Now you could use that to say, because you're flourishing, you're less likely to have those experiences. Now that's a difficult one to be clear about. I think it's implicit there, and in some of his writings becoming more say, well that's the data, and that should be quite clear to say, but you've got to interpret what it could mean. Come on, Karen?
So yeah, just to back out, where they reported a major depressive episode or a panic disorder, that wasn't necessarily diagnosed by profession, it was I decided I had a major depressive. So that's a very
Diagnostic measures, yeah.
self-report.
Yeah. Depressive children now.
Yeah, I mean, it's got other implications. If that, I mean, obviously it's a study and it's a window, but if that was representative, then it's not just about the experience of these poor people on the left. It's the impact that they're having, say, in the work environment, or if they're parenting. So it's the impact on others of the having, how you operate when you're managing or having to have coping strategies to deal with all those things.
Yes, because it's also not so much saying that, it's saying this is the bulk, I should think, but it's the overall end of it.